they're going to tell a good story, and if they're willing to tell a good, worthwhile story, I'm willing to give them a shot.
Yeah, well, and by and large, the Netflix stuff has been really, really good. I mean, obviously, Iron Fist was the major weak link in all of that, and he almost was, for me, he was almost also the downfall of the Defenders too. I think the rest of the cast sort of pulled that back from just being dreadful. But
I had a like a lot of people, I had a tough time with Iron Fist, but it was one of those things where I'm going to finish this. I know I need to finish this, and the best thing I think about Iron Fist as a character, as we've seen him portrayed in the Netflix series so far, is honestly when he shares the screen with Luke Cage, and Luke Cage essentially tells him to kind of pipe down and know his role, and you get this sense that Luke Cage is going to be the one who's really going to be able to help Danny come into his own and be more Iron Fist and less Danny Rand.
And honestly, the less that he is Danny Rand, I think that's always going to only be for the good, because Danny Rand is an annoying little piece of crap, and I don't like him. Like, that Iron Fist, just to me, it was so all over the map, right? I mean, it was like they had no idea who this character was supposed to be, because, like, 1 second he's, like, the annoying, like, he's, like, just this annoying child in a man's body.
Right.
And like it's like he hasn't learned anything about like interacting with people at all in the last 10 years, or and then he pivots on a dime from that into like this like quasi Zen, like really calm, sort of persona, and it was just all over the place. And, there was some of the fight choreography that I thought was really cool. Like, honestly, some of my favorite stuff in terms of the fight choreography was him going into the Rand building in, like, the first episode and taking out just the guards at the front of that just so effortlessly. And I thought that was really well choreographed. But, I know that there's the rest of that fight choreography has been roundly criticized, because this is supposed to be like the premier martial artist of the Marvel universe, and watching him, I don't buy it.
But I think part of it is that he has not become that yet, and he's still to hopefully become that. I think one of the most meta moments for that character actually happened in Defenders, when he has this encounter with Stick, and he goes all, whiny Luke Skywalker on Stick and says, "I'm done with lessons," and Stick just looks at him and says, "Son, lessons ain't done with you." And I think part of that was communicating to the audience, we're not done making this character into what he should be.
Yeah.
Kind of stick with us as we try to do that. And the fact that Stick, this seasoned veteran of the war with the hand, was able to come in and kind of put Danny Rand in his place like that, because in some ways Iron Fist, he kind of becomes what Stick is, what Stick was in terms of his wisdom and his capacity and that kind of stuff, and he's clearly not there yet. And so you see this juxtaposition on screen between where he's at and what he currently is, and the example of what he can become, what we know one day for him to be the character he should be, he needs to become, and to see the one example kind of, put the other in its place. I was like, all right, if you give me more of this, I can stick with this character, a little longer. And I think a lot of with a character like Iron Fist, I'm less I'm less interested in Iron Fist, and I'm more interested in other characters kind of around him that orbit him to one degree or another.
Oh, yeah.
Like
I mean,
Misty
Colleen
Knight.
Wing was way more interesting than Danny Rand.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I think it's really cool that Misty... See, when Misty Knight got shot in the arm in... what was it? In Luke Cage.
I think it was in Luke Cage.
Yeah. Then I thought, oh, maybe that's going to be the thing that gets her to, to where she has the cybernetic hand that she has in the comics. But then, later on, that doesn't happen. I thought, oh, maybe that's just as close as we're going to get. And then at the Defenders, when they have that sort of climactic confrontation, and she does lose her arm, then I thought, oh, that's really cool. Okay, they're going there. That's fun. So maybe we'll actually get a Daughters of the Dragon, little mini series with just Colleen Wing and Misty Knight, and that would kind of be rad.
That would be, I think, but what's kind of orbiting a lot of this discussion in the real world right now is, I know all of these shows are currently, on Netflix. But with what Disney's trying to do with starting their own streaming service, are those going to stay on Netflix, or are they going to get put on, Disney's service? And so if you want to continue to watch the ongoing stories of these characters, say post-Punisher, are we in a situation where we're going to have to sign up for another entertainment streaming services?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, if the price of Disney's service is decent and comparable to Netflix, I think I have a greater confidence in a Disney-run streaming service to actually have movies that I want to see, more than Netflix does. Because let's be real, 80 to 90% of Netflix's library is garbage, right? Like it's this random whatever stuff that nobody really wants to watch, and then sprinkled in there is some interesting stuff,
Stranger Things.
Like Stranger Things, yeah. See, that's kind of the rough thing because there are the real standouts. That are excellent about some of Netflix's catalog that I would miss if I just switched over to Disney's streaming service. But I think on the whole, there's a lot more that I think Disney would have to offer that I would be genuinely interested in than there is in Netflix's catalog, and especially if they continue to produce original content that's on the same kind of caliber as some of Netflix's has been. Have you watched House of Cards at all?
So that's a really interesting question. I did watch the first season of House of Cards back when it first came on because I'm based in DC, right? And at that time I was still kind of on Capitol Hill working for a member of Congress, and everybody was talking about it. And so at one point, I decided, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. And I made my way through the first season and got to the end of the first season when, kind of the resolution comes for Corey Stoll's I think Pete Ross character.
Yeah.
And I walked away and said,
resolution
nope,
is an
again.
Interesting term for the way that character ends.
And part of the reason why I didn't like it was because I was hoping there would be a degree of redemption for some characters in that first season. And that did not happen in any way.
Yeah, well, I think redemption is not really a character arc or a concept that House of Cards is especially interested in exploring.
Apparently not. And part of it also for me was watching what some of those characters go through.
Well,
in that environment.
Let me tell you, it doesn't get any better.
For me, was a little bit too real.
And that's actually something that I wanted to ask you as someone who's been around Washington and worked in there. Like, so there's parts of that kind of ring true, huh?
There are parts of that kind of ring true. And the interesting thing about it is there is a publication here in D.C. There are 3 main news publications that are actual like newspapers that tend to circulate around Capitol Hill. There's Politico, which is a newer one that's only been around about 10 years, and that tends to be the one of the 3 that gets read also outside of D.C.
Well, that one leans pretty hard to the left, right?
It leans, certainly leans to the left, yes. And then you have the 2 others. You have The Hill and Roll Call, and those 2 tend to be a little more Capitol Hill centric. They don't get read much outside of kind of the D.C., Maryland, Virginia, Capitol Hill, area. But one of those, I want to say The Hill, I don't know if they still do it, but they used to run this feature where they would take members of Congress and celebrities and do this sort of like switched at birth thing.
Okay.
Where they must be twins. There's a member of Congress that once got paired up with Kyle Chandler from Friday Night Lights because they really look alike.
Okay.
And the member of Congress was from Texas, and Kyle Chandler's character from Friday Night Lights, was football team in Texas and all of that. And so there was one where the member that I worked for from Southeast Michigan, kind of a blue collarish, more kind of politically purple area of the state, right in the middle of the Motor City territory with the big with GM and Chrysler and Ford. He got paired up with Corey Stoll's character from the first season of House of Cards.
Sure, that makes sense.
You saw not only like similarities in how they looked, but in terms of like some of the similarities between the character in kind of like the political background, where blue collar scenario, running for higher office.
Also, really like to smoke pot.
That didn't happen.
Okay.
No, that didn't happen, and if it did, I never knew about it. But and there were these interesting similarities, and because of that, some of it just kind of felt too real. And sometimes when you see a depiction of something on TV or in media that's meant to be fictional, but because you're familiar with certain things, it hits you as far too real, it just kind of does something, and you're just like, nope, I can't keep going with this. I can't continue with this. And so after that first season, I kind of hung it up and decided never to watch House of Cards ever again.
Yeah, well, and I can't say that you're actually missing a ton. For me, it's a little bit like the train wreck sort of thing where you just can't look away.
Right.
Like, and it's extraordinarily well done and well acted and very, very compelling from a dramatic standpoint.
Right.
But yeah, it is. There's not other than the technical, aspects of the production. There truly isn't a ton of redeeming value to the story itself, except as perhaps like a cautionary tale, or as sort of a thing for us all to be sort of looking out for in terms of how we view our politicians, and maybe knocking them off the pedestal a little bit and helping us to realize, hey, these people are all just people too. Like
Yeah.
they're not necessarily a lot better than you are, and they have